Joining us today for a conversation on the hurdles one can expect to face after leaving the military are Oudrey Hervey and Ralph Parrett. Audrey is a longtime friend and my prior commanding officer at Navy Recruiting District Houston and has held several director level roles upon leaving the military and is now a senior HR consultant for his organization, Global Professionals for Impact. Also joining us is Ralph Parrett, who is an electrician in the Navy and has worked as a technician, electrician, instructor, curriculum developer, and served as a training director for the AVO Training Institute before moving into his current role as the director of electrical safety services for Hallam-ICS. So, how did we get here? Ralph and I were having a conversation on the nuanced differences between serving in the military and employment after leaving services. And our conversation kind of echoed many of the same points that I had heard Audrey discuss while we were presenting two Navy Transition Assistance Program classes in New Orleans. Seeing the similarities in those stories they shared led us to having a conversation and ultimately to leading us here today to share it all with you. Audrey, can you tell our audience a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a little bit. One of the things that makes the transition sometimes difficult is that nobody really teaches us to brag on ourselves. So that is still a tale that exists today to a certain extent. So I'll just go ahead and give you a little bit of background. So yes, I retired from the Navy in, I think, 2015. In the Navy, I was the electrical officer and the anti-submarine warfare officer. During that tour, which is my only ship tour, I my skipper said, "Hey, Herv, you know everybody on the ship, like, and then you get along with them. You know, you crack the code on, you know, interpersonal relationships and things of that nature." So he said, "You make a great recruiter," and that's kind of how I got into recruiting. I went to St. Louis as an officer recruiter and did the things that Micah used to do. And that's when I learned more about the Navy. So, which I'm sure we're going to talk about OJT at some point and just observing and just kind of looking. So, coming off the ship and then going into an admin position, specifically recruiting, I learned so much more about what I was, for lack of a better word, selling, which was the Navy. And I just knew ship and shore. But I had no idea that we had public affairs officers, that we had legal officers, that we had everything that a city has, the Navy has, essentially. And I learned that, and I was like, oh man, I'm not going back on the ship. I'm going to switch to human resources, right?
Fair enough.
So that's exactly what I did. So I switched to human resources. Long story short, I worked as a recruiter. I worked in militant and personnel. Did some joint assignment assistance. Worked at the Pentagon doing the same thing with global war on terrorism. And then did two skipper tours, one at the military entrance processing station. They call it something else now. And also recruiting district. I think they call it acquisition transition,
Intag or something now. Yeah, it's something
like
different.
that. Right. And that's where I finished up my career. After that, I started working for a tug company as the director of safety, environmental safety. And then I got a gig, started my own business, went overseas, dealing with disaster management and planning. Did a gig over in West Africa and also in the Federated States of Micronesia. Came on back this way, worked for the state of Texas because I wanted to be at the pointy end of the spear helping veterans, as I was just all done with it. And so I worked for the state of Texas and I help veterans homeless, at risk for being homeless, veterans get jobs and get the assistance that they need. And then went on to become the executive director of a nonprofit that does pretty much the same thing, do outreach on the street and help them get temporary housing into permanent housing, then a job, and then they're on the path to just their own path, their own personal productivity. Since then, I lean a little forward in my company, doing a little recruiting and a little bit of HR consulting. I'm also a certified evidence-based coach. That's where I kind of help out with veterans and the businesses that hire them to help them understand not just the journey, but more so helping the individual know that there's a brand new culture. And it's just like living overseas and you have to be observant and you have to watch what's going on. You just can't jump in head first or thinking that you have to prove something. You got to sit back in the cut. You got to observe. And then you have to understand what the culture is before you decide to engage in that culture. It may not be something that you want to be. But anyway, I digress. It's supposed to be talking about me. That's it. And what I will say is that, I got a undergrad in electronics engineering, two senior HR certifications, evidence-based coaching. I'm a PhD student right now. But with all of that, I just show up as a dude from Mississippi that used to be in the Navy that's going to give it to you the way I like to give it, and that's straight up.
Absolutely. And
All right.
like I said, that's after hearing your conversations whenever we go. And that's one of the things that we do, this kind of a pro bono effort on our end, is to go and try to help some of these damn transitioning veterans understand it's going to be completely different than what you expect it to be. And I think this is going to be a very, very cool conversation for that, and kind of sharing the trials and tribulations of going through all that good stuff. And I think you both are ideal guests to kind of, translate some of that over. So hopefully save some folks some aches and pains. And then we have Ralph Parrett as well. Ralph, can you tell everybody a little bit about you?
I don't think it's very fair that I got to follow up the humanitarian efforts of Audrey, because
hard fill.
Right.
Hey.
So, like you said, I was an electrician in the Navy, and I honestly picked that as a way to have something for me to do when I got out. And I think that's something for any military member to think about, or anybody thinking about the military, is if you can, find something that you can do outside of the military, because eventually everybody gets out. So for myself, transferred out, went to worked at 2 industrial plants. And speaking to Audrey's point about, finding your place within a culture is definitely a huge thing. And I think that's one of the harder things to come to a realization of if nobody's talked to you about it, is kind of finding out where your niche fits. So for myself, going from being a maintenance technician through an instructor, finding my niche in a classroom with other adults and other technicians that are trying to progress, that's another great example of, finding the niche within a room full of grown people, looking to professionally develop themselves. So making sure that you're meeting them where they're at. And then, the curriculum development was more so, how do I empower the instructor to communicate, convey information? But then speaking of culture, when I got that director position at AVO, that was my biggest thing, was this is a culture, this is a family, this is a team-driven thing. We all rely on each other to get what we're here to do done. And what I'm here to do is not necessarily I'm not revenue driven. I'm here to make a difference for the people that come through these doors, whose companies are entrusting us to send them back more capable, more efficient, more knowledgeable, more skillful. And then coming to Hallam-ICS, one of the biggest things they asked me was, what do I want to get out of life? And I said, I just want to make a difference. So that's always my prime focus, is how can I make a positive impact for other people? And that's where I get my enjoyment out of it. Of course, you got to pay me for it. But I mean, Micah, I ain't getting paid for this, but which is cool with me. So the payback's going to be awesome. Hopefully, I'm looking forward to the feedback we get off of this. And, even if we can help one person, become aware of the challenges that are up ahead of them, coming out. And also to Audrey's point earlier, and this has been my thing is, leading up to your point of leaving for boot camp, you have what's called a recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
When it's time to part ways, there is no decruiter for you.
Mm-hmm.
It is all on you to drive the benefits of your transition as you get out. So, and then you step out into the workforce or, the public sector, and you're like, this is not the same thing. So to further reinforce Audrey's point, you stepping into a whole different world. So,
absolutely. Well, and just for everybody's knowledge, I know my typical interviews are usually a Q&A question set and all that, but this is one of those I really wanted to kind of bring it down to back to basics, grassroots, and really let you guys kind of share your story because you both have some pretty intriguing and compelling stories that you can share from that aspect of things. And, so it'll definitely be more free flowing. And obviously, feel free to chime in, ask questions of each other. I want it to really be dialogue driven for this one. And hopefully, like you said, the whole goal is sharing just a little bit with the hopes of helping a couple of people. And I can see my Audrey's the facial expressions there.
Audrey's
We got
over
some
here
good ones. And
sighing.
I think we're locked in loaded for this thing. And with that being said, Audrey, so like I said, we go and do these tap classes, and it's always amazing to me to watch how intrigued, and this is senior level. This is 04, 5, 6 that we go and chat with, and so to me, those executives probably need it more than the rest do because we're so deeply ingrained into the culture and the systematic processes that come with the military and serving the higher cause of patriotism and getting the mission done at all cost and owning all the processes and things. And so I think what we're doing, and it's not a knock against transition assistance program. I think just due to the SOPs, rules, regulations, guidance, and everything that they have so much to put out there. And so that's one of the things that Audrey and I do when we go down to New Orleans, and hopefully we'll expand that footprint a little bit as well, but is to share some of those experiential trials and tribulations. And we're often met with gasp and sighs and things like that, but in a good way. It's like, okay, this is your wake-up call. And so with that being said, Audrey, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor to kind of share some of those stories, and then Ralph will follow up and let you kind of go through yours because, again, you're on here for the same dang reasons. Whenever we connected in outreach and everything, you're like, man, I've got some stories to tell. And like you said, hopefully it'll help at least a couple of folks in that transition process. So with that being said, Audrey, let her loose, my friend.
Yeah, I think that the focus of this conversation, I really believe, is just going to be, squarely on culture. I'm fairly confident that's what we're always going to be coming back to. And when you have been in the military, let's just say more than 5 years, but definitely if you're beyond 10 and 15 and retired and things of that nature, you understand a whole lot of things about getting the job done. And I like what Ralph said earlier is like, he really is not revenue driven. Of course, you got to pay me, right? But it's about quality and value and purpose and teamwork and mission and getting the job done. And when the focus is on that, you sometimes forget that you are in a different, you're going to hear me say culture, but I'm almost like a different country. So when you take your style of leadership, your style of learning, your style of execution into a different country, a different company that's in a different country, they are successful, right? You were successful. So the question isn't about success. The question is about the how, right? Mm-hmm. How we go about it. And that's where we butt heads is the how. So one of the issues that I encountered was in the culture was, well, transition from the military to my first job, was there wasn't like a sense of urgency on nothing, and I'm not saying that people were lazy. I'm not saying that, but through my eyes, through my lens, right? What I'm accustomed to, it seems like it was a slow pace, and there was also a lack of accountability, and there was a lack of the leadership, that the way that I understood leadership, and because of that, um, I made some critical errors going into the workforce, and because I thought everyone was running on the same high octane that I have, and not just that, also communication wise, um, there's certain ways of saying, let's get it done, or we're going to get it done any kind of way. We're going to get it done. Um, I forgot the phrase that I used, but it was words to the effect of "do what it takes to get it done." Right. So to me, that means within the realm of everything that's legal and policy and whatever the process is and all of that. But I'm gonna tell you, I told someone that, and I got reported like I wanted them to do something illegal.
Right.
So it's like, words matter, but if you don't know which ones matter, then, you might, fall into a little booby trap there. So kind of going back to culture, I'll stop there for a second and just give like a recommendation is when you get your first job out of the military, act like, and Micah heard me talk about this, act like you're an embedded reporter or embedded journalists. And what you're doing is you're there. I mean, everyone understands embed, even from the military, right? So you're there, you're part of the team. Yeah, you're eating with them. Yeah, you're drinking with them. You're clocking out at the same time, all that kind of good stuff. But you're there to gather the story so that it is understood by the masses. So guess what? You as an individual, you're writing that story so that you can understand it yourself. You have to understand what that culture is like so that you can confirm whether or not you want to stay there or not. Because that culture is not going to change. I mean, you think somebody coming into the military from the civilian community is going to change the Navy? You're crazy, right? Same thing. We can't come out the Navy and think that we're going to change the culture of some corporate organization.
Yeah, it took a long process
Just
to
like
get to
that.
that culture.
Absolutely.
And it takes a lot of time to change a culture. And if you can do it quick, then it takes a lot of stress.
Yeah.
To
and it has
build
to
that
be
out.
Yeah, it has to be intended though. I
Mhm.
mean,
Yep.
is that the intent? Is that what the
Right.
leadership want? So from the individual level, my advice is sit back in the cut, do your job, ask questions, don't go above and beyond, don't talk about what you can do and who did this and who I can connect you with, and none of that. Learn the language. Learn the language. When you learn the language, you will understand the culture. When you understand the culture, you'll figure out if you want to stay or if you want to move. So I
Well,
just look at it as a big PCS move overseas.
right.
Yeah.
And to your point too, and I think this is something that's pretty salient to the point, is a lot of folks don't realize whenever you're in the military, the pace of operations, the hours put in, and things like that, that become just your norm based on years of doing it. And I've dealt with it. Like if I'm sending out emails, I want a response in 30 minutes because that's just what I'm freaking used to. And
Right.
it took a long time to understand that that's not how the rest of the world operates, and it's shocking. And I hear this time and time again from candidates that are getting out and transitioning veterans. It's like, this is easy compared to
Easy.
what I'm used to. But at that same point, I think something subliminally within inside us, like that is what we expect of everyone at that point, and that can get us into a lot of trouble. Is that a pretty fair assessment?
Yeah, definitely. The skill that they need us for, easy, right? But then there's some psychologists. I forgot his name. I think it is this cat named Adler. I'm gonna use a lot of slang here, right? But he said words to the effect of like every confrontation can be traced back to an interpersonal problem, which includes, that's all communication, how we
Mhm.
communicate, what type of experience we brought to that conversation before we felt a certain way, right? And how we responded in a particular way. So that's something that we really have to learn. So, embedded journalists, and also kind of another analogy is that you're PCS and OCONUS, and as soon whenever you go overseas or whenever your ship, pulls in, there's always a cultural brief, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
So guess what? You don't get that brief when you get to your first job. So you got to figure it out by yourself. You shouldn't figure it out sitting in jail, right? After you did something dumb, right? So you have to understand what that culture is, just enough to survive at least a quarter, like 90 days, to try to figure out what's going on. But as far as like some other experiences, they all boil down to culture and the communication. The way that I would say things, it doesn't sound like I'm a tyrant to me. It doesn't, but it's a tyrant to them. And
Right.
And here's a problem also. This is culture based, right? In the military, we had that what is it? Red, yellow, green, or when and what's it called? Bystander. What's it called? Bystander. It's like an intervention type of thing, right?
The intervention
Right.
training. Yeah.
And then just kind of understanding red, yellow, green is like, let's say somebody, going back to the military, if somebody hit it on another person, and I'm talking about being, frisky, hit, not that. And if they didn't like that, they didn't desire that, it was incumbent upon that person to tell them that is not appreciated, and please don't do that again. Guess what? I'm on guard. I'm out. But you say something like that on a job, and I'm not saying that I said anything that was frisky. Yeah. Well, no, I don't even have to say I'm not saying it. I'm saying I didn't. But sometimes the way things are taken, they just go and report it, or they sit on it and fester.
Yep.
Until something else goes wrong, like I blink with my left eye before my right eye, or I don't do it in unison, and now there's something wrong with me, and oh, by the way, he told me blah blah blah. I'm like, where did this come from?
Yeah, I think both of you bring up like a pretty valid point. Like, not only the means of communication is different, because in the Navy we had radios and email.
That's right.
We had telephones, right? Yeah. And if you needed something fast, you picked up the phone. Right. If you didn't have a radio, if you needed something super fast, you hit the radio, but it better be for a good reason. But there's plenty of times, somebody calls you on the phone and you're not agreeing on the phone. Be like, don't make me come down there, because that's a huge deal. I don't want to have to come down five decks to come talk to you. So if I do, it's going to be a big. It's more than words, right?
Right.
Whereas we get out in the civilian world, it's kind of interesting because. This is one of the things that I had to learn was, a phone call is I need something now. So pretty much the same thing. A text message is something that I need soon. Whereas an email is, I could wait a couple of days. So that's one of the things that was different too. So, and then to your point, Audrey, about, it's not just what is said, it's how it is received.
Right.
And so when you get into, if anybody ever takes any communications classes, it'll talk about it and say the intent is one thing. So what is said is one thing. It's how it is interpreted is where the value is placed. When we're in the military, it's do this. And if it's why, because I said so, like this is pretty cut and dry. I think that kind of goes back to like one of the biggest struggles that we had talked about before we came in here was, understanding the difference in the direction or the motivation for a company versus a troop, unit, ship, military organization. Is now it's not about completing a mission for the benefit of the masses. It's driving to make revenue and profit.
Yes.
And even if you have a really great and amazing leader in a position of influence. And so that's one thing that I try to tell people too is, well, us in management, I'm in management, I'm a management position. Oh, that's great. My title is a director, but I could be the worst leader in the world.
Right.
And we've seen that both in and out, where it's like, man, this cookie right here could definitely get lost in a glass of milk, if you know what I'm saying. So, and I wouldn't bat an eye. But anyways, but then, and it's, well, what we say is what goes. Man, I worked in an organization like that. But the difference is I believed in the mission that they were telling me what the purpose was. Here, right. I know what your mission is, and it's an individual. Maybe it's an individual mission. It's not going to work for everybody like this, because some people are just assholes like that. Mm-hmm. Where an individual, their personal motivation is self-benefit.
Yes.
And so if that's what they may not say that,
right,
but you can tell.
That's what they learned.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So you see this and it's like, man, and to your point, Audrey, I don't fit in that culture.
Mm-hmm.
The struggle that I had in one particular place was, but I love what I do.
Right.
And I love what we are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is I was not in a corporate position of influence.
Mm.
And one of the things I learned taking, another management class about communication and things like that was, a leader is not a title.
Right.
Leadership is not a title. You can lead from any position. And so what I like to push out is like, be a beacon of light.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be positive all the time. That's another misconception that's out there is like, you got to be Mr. Positive over here. No, I can be just as pissed off as you and disagree with what's happening just as much as you. But, I can also flip it around and say, hey, but look at what we're doing. We keep doing what we're doing. We're doing the right things. And that person eventually probably going to get lost in a glass of milk.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, a big difference between, we've been touching on this. There's this, being like intrinsically motivated,
mm-hmm.
and then extrinsically, right?
Yep.
Intrinsically, all those values and
right.
all that stuff you're talking about, team, determination, motivation, vision,
mm-hmm.
all those nice things, that's what we're driven by, because we never really have to worry. We didn't have to worry about money. We might not like how much we got.
Yeah,
but we will.
Amen.
Yeah,
coming from an enlisted brother here. Amen. All right.
Yeah. So that money was allocated for us
mm-hmm.
in the budget, and boom, is based on how many years you've been in and whatever your pay grade is, and pay-out, that's what you got. And it's done for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That purpose is so we can concentrate on the intrinsic value, on the mission, on each other, on teamwork. But again, the extrinsic side of it is, I'm the boss. What's my title? How much money
mm-hmm.
I make? How many people, am I in charge of? But the quality aspects of it, that's the glue to me.
Right.
That's between how much money you make and then your title. But what about the quality part of it? Are you a leader? Can you really encourage people to follow you? Can you really do that? In a lot of cases, is no. I have pulled up a stat, with Society of Human Resource Management. They did this survey about 4 years ago or something like that. And we've been talking about culture, so it's appropriate. I just pulled this out my desk here. It was about 1,500 or so HR leaders, CEOs, and then just Society Human Resource Management members. And real quick, so 53% of working Americans who have left the job due to workplace culture report leaving because of their relationship with their manager. 53%. 94% of people managers agree a positive workplace culture creates a resilient team of employees. So they know that, right? And then here's the thing here, going to the leadership thing. 26% of people managers indicate their organization does not provide them with leadership training. So you could round down or round up, but essentially every fourth manager you see has had no training at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're expecting them to make, wonderful decisions, not just about the job, but they're, to a certain degree, less so than in the military, they're still responsible for us in a professional level, from a professional lens or perspective, rather. They're still responsible for my growth and my development. They're responsible for my performance. But if they can't orchestrate that title to be able to get people to get a job done, which is very, very common, unfortunately, then you get butthurt, and you're either going to stay there, and suffer the consequences because you're just going to internalize it and things are going to get bad and go from bad to worse, unfortunately, or you're going to listen to some of us on this panel and figure out that, that's a culture that you don't want to be a part of and bounce.
Yeah.
Well, it also kind of ties into the Jim Collins right seat on the bus type mantra, right? Like they're going to promote you up until your level of incompetence. And so a lot of that, and if you're not getting the proper training, I think that's one thing the military did do very well for us, is we had to. You didn't have a choice. You had to go through the leadership training, and you had to, even at the third class petty officer level leadership, you had to start working your way up.
That's
and
right.
So, and I mean, obviously, we've been around for several hundred years now, so it kind of makes sense. We might have some of this stuff figured out better, but you can't almost fault some of these places just because they simply don't understand and don't have those processes in place. So, and I just wrapped up a conversation with a gentleman by the name of Tom Sandry, and most of it was focused on technical ability and acumen and training for the workforce. Right. But it does definitely seem like it would be very salient to introduce more of that leadership style training. And I don't know, everything we're doing is P&L driven, right, on the civilian side. So it's everything's a freaking cost center. So it's how much can you sacrifice in order to make sure that they are trained up to the levels they need to be.
So
and then will they leave?
So Audrey, bro, like we got it's called resonance, man.
Yeah.
Same frequency, brother. Yeah. So I saw one today from a CEO that commented on another training groups. This gal, she posted, there's no greater feeling for myself knowing that these people are going out to the workforce with more knowledge, more skills. And it was a technical training course. And this gentleman commented and said, I was in a conference and this guy was talking about it, and somebody asked a question like, hey, what if you train your people and they leave? And so a lot of people, so the response is train them so they don't. Mm-hmm. No, this one, I was like, he said, what if you don't train them and they stay? Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, snap.
Right.
So it made me think about stuff that I try to, put counsel into, younger men that I'm talking to as a group that I work with. And that is, if you're not improving yourself, right? So you're going to stay the same. You're not staying the same, because as everybody else is improving, you're increasing the gap between them and you. And so in reality, if I'm measuring them compared to you, you're worse than them. If I'm measuring you to them, then they're better than you. I mean, you can look at it either direction. So there's that one too. And I think, kind of to the point too, from the enlisted standpoint, when you get out, right? So I made it a point for myself personally, because my job was to lights on, keep lights on, gens running. We fix stuff. So because, on a ship does electricity not touch? And so I would tell, crew members that came into the shop, I said, look, our job here is to sustain and supply power to this ship so that the ship can complete its mission, right? That is our mission. And and I'm a little frisky with my words sometimes, but I actually had an officer get up one time, was like, does anybody know why we're here? And I'm like, man, this is engineering, dude. Make water, make way, and make lights, brother. That's what we do. That's what we're here for. And so when you come out of that, right? So the direction is given to you, right? We're not having to deal with the higher side of operations and what's the ship's movement's going to be? How do we move into this fleet? How are we navigating? What are we doing to support Marine operations, Air Force, Army operations? Down where I was, it's if I don't do my gig, then y'all can't do yours.
Correct.
And so my focus was always on what my gig was. And that's what I always try to get folks that I worked with. And even when I got out was like, hey, if we all do what we're here to do,
Right.
then we get to do what we're here to do. And we get told good job. But the big thing we're looking for is you can get off this, chunk of steel and go have a good time.
Right.
And now it's all right, the day is done. Let's clock out. So kind of to your point too, Audrey, about the speed, right? If you came down to me on the ship and like, hey, I'm all ears. I'm ready to go. I'm about to go. I will do whatever is necessary with or without people looking to get that done so that you can leave me alone.
Right. Exactly.
Whereas like with the civilian side, to your point about that speed, that sense of urgency, it's not there.
Right.
And I've personally had to adjust myself to that speed. Because it's easy to come out in a technical aspect and you first day on the job, first week on the job, first month on the job, everybody's looking at you like, hey man, you want to cut what you're doing in half? Because you're making the rest of us look bad.
Man, I was going to talk about that.
So the thing is, and I'm not saying that that's everybody, right? I'm not saying that's going to be 100% all the time. And, but I got that even too on the Navy, when I was on the ship, like, hey man, y'all making, and I had ran into this before and my, overconfident self, because I'm a lot wiser now than I was 10, 15 years ago. My response then was, no, y'all are making me look better. And in the military, so to your point too, Audrey, earlier, I could say that in the military and nothing, right? You get into the civilian world and say something like that. I mean,
well, what you said.
That's case scenario. You might end up in human resources getting a little letter,
Well, and to that point, Audrey, you brought this up, and I think it's very salient to point out the staying in your lane and not overstepping your particular zone.
And so I was going to hit on that one and say, and so this is another thing I learned, kind of moving through the more professional side of things. Once I stopped, once I moved from being a tech and getting into training and then, into a director position. And that's, they have these things called a 30, 60, 90-day plan. And I was like, what a magical thing. Wow. I just showed up with a bag, like I'm ready to go, but now it's like, okay, so one of the things I recommend to transitioning veterans is when you get that first gig in the interview, make it known right then and there. Do you have a 30, 60, 90-day plan for me if I get this job? And if they look at you like, what is that? Then this kind of goes to the culture thing. If you don't have a plan for me when I start, then I'm going to be lost.
You are.
And so I'm going to reference the Patriot to that British general saying, imagine leaderless armies having at each other. That's how you're going to feel. You're like, I don't even know what to do.
Yeah.
I don't, so if they don't have that plan, then if you still want the job, then take it. But I would highly suggest going in there that you have a 30, 60, 90-day plan for yourself.
Exactly.
And I would definitely that first 30 days, it's all eyes, all ears, and not a whole lot of mouth.
100%.
And yes, understood what you're saying. Got it. Take notes, write stuff down, make plans for yourself, and adjust the 60s off the first 30 and the 90 off that first 60. And that, I feel like that's a really great tool that you can use to integrate yourself, your past experiences into that culture and the speed that everybody moves in. I highly recommend getting to know people at even the smallest personal level, and, being cautious with yourself too.
100.
Because then you can find out what motivates who I work with, and you can find out real fast who is that title driven person. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you also have those people like, hey, my external motivation for this place is I've got a wife and 3 girls. And I'm going to do right by them first and me second. And by doing them right, is you better pay them enough money to let you borrow me from them.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then inside of that culture piece, if I'm not getting taken care of culturally, like, then I got to do right by them too. Because if I'm bringing stuff back home with me that's not working, then this just isn't the place for me.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's a hard nail to chew on, and to your point too, Audrey, for folks that are in 10 plus years, I was in for 8. And luckily for me, the trade that I worked in, very similar to what I was doing in the Navy. Right. So whereas that management, that positions of influence, that's definitely a huge hurdle to overcome, especially guys that do 20 years. I mean, kudos to you guys.
It was, I'm not gonna lie, it was a kick in the sack, man. It was very detrimental. And like I said, it was enough for me, and especially if you're retired and you're comfortable and things like that. Like I was so frustrated with the process. I'm like, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not. And then that led me to start my own damn thing, so I wouldn't have to.
Yep.
Hence having you guys on, because you guys have the experience. But and to your point, Ralph, Audrey, this is one thing you talk about, and kind of translating into another organization that mirrors, a lot of the construct within the military. Audrey, you worked with other entities where you would expect, I believe it was the VA, if I'm not mistaken, or it might have been the VA, but even then, where you would expect that they would understand the military construct and fluency and structure, even then, that's not guaranteed. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. For many reasons, one of them, just the decreasing population of workers who have either been to the military or have like an uncle, cousin, aunt, mom, dad that's been in the military. Those numbers going all the way down. So there really isn't any association, nothing to relate to as far as the military is concerned. So they as in the workers for these organizations, very few of them like understand the mission, the passion, was in a supportive type of role. And it's any other job. It's any other job. So then when you do have someone, a veteran is like, oh man, I found this great veteran organization and this is what I want to do. And you go in like the military head, that you are, then it's still a culture clash, because there's a certain way of doing things. And just point of clarity, I didn't work for the VA. I worked with the VA as executive director of a nonprofit that had grants from HUD, the VA, and Department of Labor. Yeah,
no, totally makes sense.
Yeah, I had to. I won't say which organization, but I'll say I had two different organizations where I had to really like interpret what the resume said, right? What the resume really said. And it didn't have a lot of military gobbledygook. It was just, I knew that if you were first class in the military, then you're running, they don't call it, you remember our old CR, they don't call it first class for nothing, right? You first class, right?
Mark Clark.
Right. So you understand, right? Your skill, you understand management. You understand, and not just understand, but at a first class level. So here's this first class that was, trying to get this job, and I heard everything other than what I saw, until I piped up. Another example is a veteran. I don't want to say being too honest, but being too honest for civilian workforce, right?
Oh, that's so, Audrey, that's a huge point, man.
Yeah.
Tell them what they need to hear.
And that's it. So we grew up on honor, courage, and commitment, and I will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do.
Right.
I'm a United States sailor. I protect and defend the United States, blah, 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 blah. All of that, which is wonderful, but they never heard a sentence of that before. They never embraced a sentence of that ever.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Audrey, this is the individual you and I had an offline conversation that we spoke about, and we won't mention him by name because I wouldn't do that to him. But this individual was probably one of the most motivated, high running, get her done individuals you could run across. Like, just phenomenal. Admin, right? That's who we're talking. Okay, yeah. So talking about the same guy, and I've worked with him, and I would go to hell and back for that guy. He was just everything you would want to be the bedrock of an organization. Smart, intelligent, driven.
Yes.
You know, put in 20 hours a day if he had to. It didn't make it damn. And yeah, and it was a damn shame to hear about that.
A tough transition, since we're not calling any names. Then he worked at the VA and left 9 months in.
Yeah.
It was his honor to work at the VA, being a retired individual, coming to help, to support, to buttress, the mission, and working for veterans and all of that glossy stuff, right? And then you get in there and nobody is doing their job through our eyes.
Right.
They're getting the job done.
That's the catch.
Right. And the problem with that is how you can get so disgusted, especially if you're helping veterans, is that I know veterans need the help.
Right.
Even as an officer, I was one of them. I wish somebody would have sat me down and said, Audrey, take half of your brain out of your head and half of your heart.
Yeah.
Actually, take all of your heart out and half of your brain, and now go in and learn the culture and understand what's going on. Because if you're too passionate about it, if you love the job, it won't love you back.
How it feels.
Yeah, sometimes you got to set your your passions aside and hold on to what you can. Shoot, man, I could only imagine going into the VA. Just from working with the VA, to be nice about it, right? Like, man, this takes a while sometimes, and there's a lot of us out there that, and I'm not undamaged goods, but I ain't damaged, that. And I've known some veteran Marines that hit by IEDs and stuff, and they're not getting any approval for stuff, and it's crazy. So I can totally understand where, coming in with that type of passion.
Yes.
I'm here, and I mean, good Lord, I'm here to make a difference for the people that I was alongside of and willing to give everything I had, and they were willing to do it for me too. And then I could, not having firsthand experience, but you walk in and for someone to work there that hadn't had that experience, then how could they have the same motivation as you? And maybe that's one of the things too, like it's a good transition point, is come to the realization that not everybody's going to be motivated and as passionate about maybe what you are going into that type of job.
Right.
So I think, to your point, like setting your heart aside and, kind of taking a step back and looking at your passions, but then at the same time, if it's not for you, then it's not for you, which is unfortunate to hear. Because I would much rather see a bunch of passionate veterans in there helping veterans than, and getting stuff done and moving at a speed that they think is right.
Right.
So
right. And honestly, I'm definitely not trying to bash any organization to include the VA.
Same here.
They do great work and everything. There's no doubt about it. But we're still talking about culture. I mean, how many veterans? I have no idea, but I assume that it's not. I assume it's not 100%. How many veterans work at the VA? How many veterans work at the VA that are in those positions that can bring about, substantive change? How many veterans work at the VA who can I don't want to say even cascade down,
trickle down,
right? But how about this right here? Be agile enough, right, in this bureaucratic spider web to be able to make a decision without, going 15 levels up. And then you're waiting 15 levels down to get the answer to do something. It prevents you from being able to have the type of impact that is necessary for now, right? There are now decisions that need to happen now. That's what it's called, right? So is there, or are there leaders, that stay and I don't want to say buck the system, but challenge the system and make hard, courageous decisions and just make it happen. I don't know. I would like to think so, because I like to think that they were cut from the same cloth as, people who served in the military. But I do know the more bureaucratic, the larger the organization, the harder it is to get things done.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
And it's it's a shame. It's a shame that we can't be agile. I'm saying we veteran organizations,
Absolutely.
and they contract a whole lot of different nonprofits, to act on their behalf. That's why they give the grants, so they can perform, perform some of the functions of the VA. But at the same time, it's still an organization. It's a civilian organization run by civilians, led by civilians, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But it goes back to how we started this thing off: is culture.
Absolutely.
Well,
and a caveat to the audience here: we're not pissing all over civilian side of things or anything like that. It's just to kind of frame the lens with which we see things as veterans trying to leave. So I'm sure the comments will blow up and be like, well, these guys are military entitled guys, but that's not what it's about. Is to tell the lessons learned based on lived experiences.
If you came and worked with one of us, and I think you'd learn pretty quick that we're not self-entitled folks.
Exactly.
Not at all.
If we were self-entitled, we wouldn't be doing this.
That's correct.
100%. So I think to the next one to look at is like the camaraderie piece, because that was a big part of something that we talked about last time we all got together. Was to that kind of, to Audrey, to your point, say the gentleman stayed. He's not going to get that external fulfillment though, with that sense of camaraderie that we get in the military. And that's another lesson learned too. Getting out was seeing, hey, in the military, it takes all kinds. And y'all know what I'm saying.
It does. Mm-hmm.
And when you get out in the civilian world, there are a lot more civilians, and you'll find out that there's a lot more different kinds too.
That's right.
And that's why, speaking towards that culture piece and finding your place in it is a large. I can't tell you if any veteran that I have talked to has never said, when asked, what do you miss? They will. One of the top three answers is always 100%. That camaraderie.
Absolutely.
Even if they hated it.
Yep.
Even if they hated what they did, what their job was, who they worked with, they'll still say camaraderie.
Absolutely.
They'll still say, and that's that piece of, for me going underway on a deployment, you hit that second month underway, or like fourth or fifth week, you could start seeing everybody's mentality changing. Because it's like, hey,
we're here now.
We ain't going nowhere.
Right.
You're the tip of the spear, friends.
We're all on this thing together, whether we like it or not. And, a couple times in the Navy, I would tell folks, I'd be like, hey, you might want to change your mentality and your approach, because it's not like you can leave.
That's right.
So, we're all in this together. So you can either, paddle the boat with us, or you could be dragging your oar in the water and everybody's going to know. But then as soon as you need something from somebody that is rowing the boat, they ain't going to come at you. They ain't going to help you.
Right.
And
you almost have no choice. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of that
because the thing is you want the boat to get where it's going. So I don't want to row. But I want to say it's positive peer
pressure, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like we like, and I think that's a very salient point that you don't really see as much of either. And it's mainly just due to the silos, right? Everybody's living their own damn lives, doing whatever, taking care of mom, dad, and all that other good stuff. And again, a lot of what we do is life and death in the military. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that, right?
Yeah.
We're warheads, foreheads, doing all that good stuff. Yeah. And I can remember just like, the friendly phrase is shit bags, right? Like a shit bag's going to get lit up, period. That's just what it's going to be. And you're either going to drink the juice or you're not, and be dealt with accordingly. That's kind of what it has. And just due to, the bureaucracy and the amount of HR, considerations that are out there, and liabilities and legalese and all that other good stuff, you don't have that stick to carry. You don't get to use that as an enforcement mechanism. And again, my purview is very limited, having not done a lot in the civilian sector. But is that accurate? Oh,
I'd say like the peer pressure inside the military for sure. Yeah. And and then the obvious thing is you can, being around somebody as much as you're around each other when you're in the military, you can figure out really quick the caliber of person that you're around. I think on the civilian side, it could be a little bit harder because of just kind of how do you dissect somebody that you're only around for 8 hours? Now, granted, you're still spending more time with them than your family,
Right.
but you know, there's a lot of people when they go to work, they flip a switch. It's work mode. I am who I am at work. When I go home, I flip a switch. I am who I am at home.
That's
and
right.
so, and shoot, I mean, two sides of the coin. You could be an amazing worker at work and a horrible human being outside. You could be a horrible, amazing person at home and a horrible person at work.
Yeah.
So
I think this touches on.
I'm not saying those are the only two options. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, but you have like who you are, right? And then you have like your decisions and behavior, and then although those two things are impacted by your environment of others, other people's decisions, how they roll, how they work, what their motivation is, and all that stuff. And I'm gonna throw out this sexy term.
Ooh.
It's
all right.
It's called reciprocal.
Let me get my camera ready. I want to record this.
I'm going to do it nice and slow. Reciprocal determinism.
Ooh.
That's some high speed stuff right there.
Yeah. But it's basically, what I said is like when you're in this particular environment, we're talking about culture, right? There's you and who you are and your values, right? And then there's your behavior. And then over here is like those environmental factors that basically impact the way other people, work together, and then how you behave based on your environment and the other things that you really can't control, right? So it's like, okay, that's why it's so important just to sit back and get that culture in, because you have to look at how you're responding in that environment. You just can't look at the environment. You got to look at how is it affecting you? How is it impacting you? How do you feel right now? Do you feel pissed off? Well, then take a look at what's going on. Do you feel happy, sad, whatever's going on? Are you ready to head for the hills? Do you want to quit? How are you engaging? It's real important, really, just to understand. It's just like pulleys, right? It's like this one's turning this way and this one's turning the other way, and it's because of the way that the belt is going for the most part. So how do you see your work environment? How you see your work environment and the people within it is how you behave. No doubt about it. It's how you behave. I don't know if y'all kind of young. I don't know if you remember that movie they used to show, The First 72. You remember that First 72 Hours when they had
seen the first 72.
Oh, yeah.
When they ain't that young.
Okay. Well, they should make a new movie because anyway, but it makes sense. If you got a dirtbag who's on restriction, who's the only one that can check you in, you're going to take the dirtbag route. That's the way you're going to go. You're going to end up in trouble, and you're going to get discharged from the military. So that person is an inject into the environment that really doesn't reflect the entire environment. That's just one
first impressions, basically.
Yeah, that's just one person. But you got to sit back and not just look at one person. You have to figure out how that person fits into the culture, and if that's a culture that you want to be a part of.
Yep.
So, anyhow,
100%.
Yeah. What else we got, man?
We're looking good. We're right at an hour, and I think we hit a lot of salient stuff. But go ahead, Ralph.
I was just going to throw out one recommendation to folks that are transitioning is if you're having a hard time finding that camaraderie, it's not taboo to join the American Legion, VFW, and other organizations.
Same.
Because I'm telling you right now, there are plenty of I'll say seasoned veterans, and by seasoned that means that they have aged very well. They will be excited that you walking in those doors.
Absolutely. Thanks for saying that, Ralph.
They will be excited that you're there. If you want to feel a personal purpose to drive towards something, organizations, again, VFW, American Legion, as well as others. There's plenty of other Elks Lodge, there's Masonic lodges, there's a whole bunch of different organizations that
That's right.
their whole purpose and viewpoint and ideology is it's not for me, it's for everyone else. And so that's why for myself it was like a natural thing. But also, when I first got out, I was like, man, do I go to the VFW?
Right.
I've
It's almost got a stigma in some situations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but man, I tell you, first time you walk in, it's same thing. It's a culture inside that room.
Yes.
But I'm telling you right now, the difference is everybody in there understands you to a degree that you may not get somewhere else. So that would be something that I would recommend even looking into, because they do community outreach programs. They do fundraising. They eat great food.
Yes.
There is some great fellowship, if you will.
Yes. That's what I call it.
And and it's also a really great way to connect into your community if you're moving to a place that you hadn't lived before. Because that was going to be another point is when you separate, you're detaching yourself from your family for however long you've been in. And so like for myself being in Dallas, there's, I think, one actual shipmate that's here in Dallas. But I mean, that's it out of 500 people, but probably over the 1,500 plus people that I met in the Navy. So you lose that culture, that community that you had, unless you stay in that area. So
great point, Ralph. I mean, 100%. I thought about that, and it was a fleeting thought, but that's so important. If you decide to stay at that company, and you really don't like it that much, or it just might be that transition, right?
Maybe you don't like the culture, but you love what you do as a job, what the company does.
Right.
And you're just not feeling that self-worth.
Right. Stick around, just play this thing through.
Yep.
And then, go sit at a doggone grill your own steak event at Wounded Warriors or you were talking about VFW
Sons
and things
of the Flag is another one that's really cool organization that's out there too.
A lot of good organizations out there, no doubt about it. So 100%. So I will just kind of cap and just say, observe, practice more on the job training, even though you're trained for the job. Just pretend like you're getting trained all over again. Make sure that you're looking through the lens of culture. Make sure you're looking through the lens of fit. At the same time, if you feel like, I'm not digging this. I don't like this at all. Go talk to a shipmate, not any other service also. Right. Go talk to a fellow vet and chop it up with him or her. And then going back to your job, if it pays well and you can get through it, but you can't stomach that they're not working fast enough for you, or they're not communicating the way you want, or anything like that, as long as you're not getting in trouble and you can stomach it, you're going to get to a point to where, yes, I've assessed this situation and I know 100% that this is a place that I want to be, or where I don't want to be. And then, of course, you line up a job and everything, and then bounce. But don't get afraid the first time. It's scary. Yeah, I'm serious. But don't get afraid. Your first job out, you're gonna, again, going back to the very beginning, it's like going to another country, right? Without that cultural brief to understand what not to do. You don't have to know everything to do. But we started out talking about don't lean too forward, stay in your lane, observe, ask questions, figure out the culture, and let that ride.
Yep.
What you got? Parting thoughts, Ralph?
Oh, how am I supposed to follow this humanitarian man up?
Oh man,
I'm doing lucky being an uneducated kid, just throwing in my eloquence where I can.
I know, Mr. Doctor over there, right? Doctor, soon to be doctor.
Look,
right?
Education is experience.
Yeah.
Period. That the best education you can get is experience. The things wherever you've been all over the world and talking to people, having great conversations and having awful conversations, that's education.
I'm glad you
Period.
threw in awful conversations too, because you can learn a bunch from what's right and what's wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What else you got? Anything else, Ralph?
No, man, my parting gift, I guess, or statement would be, Micah, thanks for responding to the random LinkedIn message. And I'm grateful because I got to meet Audrey. If I'm ever in the Houston area, I'm gonna hit you
Please, come on.
up. And if you're ever in Dallas, hit me up. Come over for a steak night.
I'll
That's
be
what's
there.
up.
Same, Micah. So it's been this is always a fun thing for me to stretch out because I think this is only like the third podcast that I've ever done.
Yeah.
So, and I ain't a huge fan of them personally, but no, doing them, but listen to them. So, Micah, thanks for what you're doing, man, for the veteran community.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And thanks to you, Audrey, for what you've done for the veteran community and what you guys both continue to do. I'm over here selfish.
You're doing it right now, Ralph.
You're doing it right now, brother.
Yeah,
I appreciate
you're
it.
sharing the story.
So,
And for parting thoughts for me, man, doing this and having these conversations, it kind of alludes to what we talked about with the VFW and all the other associations that are out there. It's therapeutic, right?
Right.
So now, I mean, and I'm going to touch on the darkness here. The suicide rate for veterans is ridiculous, right? 22 a day, and I think that number's even gone up some since the last study they did. Find somebody, and even if you don't feel comfortable getting out in those organizations, highly recommend it. And I need to be more re-engaging with that as well. But another thing to look at from a relationship network and using LinkedIn, I found it to be extremely awesome. Like I said, connected with Ralph. We had conversations offline. You get to unload some of those experiences, get them off your chest. Another thing, even as it pertains to the job search, use the tools that are available to you. Use that LinkedIn. If it like I always tell them, find 3 to 5 companies that are interesting to you. Look into their culture. Reach out to veterans that are already working there. That's your spy on the inside. You can actually ping them for information. You know what I mean? And
pimp.
That was some Navy love right there. My bad. Just throwing it back out there. I know I need to work on that PC aspect of the conversation piece. It's hard when I'm talking to you guys. But like it is truly a spy on the inside, so you can start kind of getting some alignment from somebody who's lived the same experiences or something very similar to what you do. And then you've already kind of, like I said, got the spy on the inside. You know what the organization's about. And then not only that, if you're looking, that's an internal referral if you work on those relationships and building, further increasing your probability of getting a job there. And now you have somebody that you can kind of vent, your frustrations with, work through it. Chances are they've been there for a year, 2 years, 3 years. Now you have somebody where you can, that won't go to HR and blow them up for you because they understand where you're coming from. So leverage those relationships. Those are the most fundamental ways in order to kind of get into an organization and will make your transition much easier. And I preach that. That's what I teach at these TAP classes is relationship-based networking based on the veteran mindset. So leaning into that, don't be afraid, reach out. People are living it. We're not carving new paths here. There are already people out there living the dream. Find those people, befriend them, become relationship driven. Don't make it a transaction. Hey, bro, I see you're a veteran. Can you give me an internal referral? Like, what the hell is that? Like that, you're not serving yourself well. If you truly have an eye on that prize, reach out, develop and foster a relationship. It starts with a freaking connection request and a 300 character, outreach. Hey, love your considering the organization. See you were Navy. Can I pick your brain? Right? Like let's just start there. Don't make it transactional. And that's why I'm doing this 1,000 digital cups of coffee a year, right? And I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I want to have these conversations because we need to get back to relationships, right? We need to get away from those 30-second Instagram clips of everybody feeling this way and that. And really, we're such a divided nation right now. If we would just focus on building those relationships and having the understanding and not making everything a damn legal or HR freaking nightmare, life would be good. You know, look, we're fixing America one conversation at a time here.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, I think if more people that weren't so polarized would get out there and have conversations like this, then we'd realize that while we may be told that we're divided, we're not.
No.
Because at the end of the day,
a lot more middle ground.
And I loved your point, man. It's develop the relationship and stop being so transactional. And that's one of the reasons why I'm with the group that I'm with now, because that is one of their number one things is developing relationships. Of course, there has to be a transaction, but That's on a business side of things. When it's not
Right.
business side, you know, my transaction to another person is what can I help you with?
Thank
Mhm.
you. Yes.
And even if that's you venting, to your point, Micah, if you find someone on common ground at work, you can both disagree with what's happening and then go back and feel better about it and keep on keeping on.
Absolutely.
So, and you're developing a relationship by doing that kind of stuff. So,
No, 100%. And with that note, gentlemen, I think we can call it Gilbert an hour and 10 here. And I know you guys are of the same mindset. Audrey, if somebody wants to reach out to you, get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Ooh, I guess the best way would probably be via email. It's a long email, so I'll make sure it's posted somewhere.
Got you. And I'll
Okay.
include it. I'll include it in the outreach and all that other good stuff and show
Yeah.
notes and then in the LinkedIn clip. As
Okay.
always, we release these. It'll go long form YouTube, long form podcast, clip series, 3 to 5 to 8 minutes. Some of them run really long if the points are salient, and they kind of do. And I want to make sure it gets across.
Sure.
So they'll be on LinkedIn as well. Are you on LinkedIn pretty often or not really?
Oh, quite a bit.
Okay. So
Yeah.
we'll definitely tag you in the LinkedIn aspect of things as well and kind of do
Okay.
it for that. And then Ralph, where can we find you, my friend?
LinkedIn is going to be the best one, brother.
Gotcha. And
Yep.
like I said, you've seen my content in and out and
Mhm.
every day and all that other good stuff. I'll link you guys' profiles in there. And
That'll
so
work.
folks can reach out. And I do know that folks do, in fact, reach out. I've had several previous guests be like, hey, I found, I touched base with this guy and all that. And again, it's easing the process and hopefully, making a difference in at least a couple of folks' lives, right? Like I think
Right.
we're all the same mindset. Give until it freaking hurts. And then, there'll be a transaction eventually, but by and large, it's just to help people, man. And
Yep.
that's really the whole point of this thing, even if it's one or two.
So what's
And
up?
any other last minute, oh, by the ways, before we wrap this thing up? Awesome, gents. Well, thank you so much for another phenomenal conversation. Again, I hope we help at least a couple of folks kind of navigate this extremely painful process, realizing it doesn't have to be painful if you put in a little bit of legwork on the front side. Start reaching out, start finding those associations. It is hard if you don't get it off your chest. I fell victim to this as well. You have to be able to talk through it, right? Guys, by and large, we're suck it up, do whatever the hell we have to make it work. You will be miserable if you don't if you don't kind of take that path and kind of try to work through it. But that's my little final parting thought there. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much again, and until next time, folks. Mike out.
All right.